Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series on the patriarchs. Last week we looked at Joseph and his brothers and and how there was a theme there, a continual theme there of Joseph, that being a picture of Messiah in the Jewish people. And today we'll see that theme continue as we talk about Joseph and his father, as well as other things that we shall learn. Sometimes people look over these passages sort of as flyover country, but really there's a lot in there and a lot more than I will go over today. But still, you shall see there's quite a bit in there, actually. Now, we're going to begin here in Genesis 44, verses 1 through 6. We ended last week with the last verse of 43. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put every man his money in his sack's mouth. And put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack of the youngest, and his corn money. He did according to all that Joseph had spoken, to the word Joseph had spoken. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away, they and their asses. And they were gone out of the city, and yet not far off. Joseph said to his steward, follow up after the men. And when you overtake them, say, where have you rewarded evil for good? Is this not it which my Lord drinks, and whereby indeed divines? You have done evil in so doing. And he overtook them and spoken to them these same words. So we see a repeat of before. Once again, he's putting all the money in, and he's putting the double money they brought back as well. But this time he's putting his youngest cup in the mouth of Benjamin. And as we shall see, this is all a plot. This is the end purpose of all this is about Joseph's father, not really about the brothers or even Benjamin. About getting Jacob to come down there, as it were. So now I want to bring your attention here to the silver cup for a minute. That the silver cup here, this silver cup speaks of, reminds of another cup, the cup of sanctification. In Hebrew, a kadush isn't technically a cup; it's actually the pronunciation of sanctification, often used to set the sanctify the grape juice or wine, to set the Sabbath apart, as well as the other moeds or appointments of God, and perhaps even some chags like it might also be used in Purim, at Purim, for example, or Hanukkah as well, if they want to set the date, set that up time. But it's about sanctification. That silver cup, and it speaks of a connection, redemption, and a connection with God. And now, in like manner here, Joseph has a silver cup as well. And notice how he says he divines with it. Tell him he's divining with it. Because remember, they don't recognize it's Joseph. Like we mentioned last week, just as Messiah has been remade to look like a Gentile, so Joseph was remade into the image of an Egyptian, which was a type of Gentile. In my children's Bible group, Messiah, Jesus, Yeshua, Yahshua if you prefer, was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, tall, very light-skinned, good looking, which is, nothing like what the Bible describes him at all. But, he'd been remade into the image of a Gentile and caused the Jewish, so the Jewish people did not recognize him. Well, his brothers, because Joseph's been remade in the image of an Egyptian, they don't recognize him. And this divining is something the Egyptians did with a cup. You may have heard the expression "reading the tea leaves" or something. Well, it was similar ideal with the little hard bits of grape, maybe the the process of refining the juice wasn't as good as this day, and some of these little bitter parts that fall to the bottom. And they'd look at those, and so they could determine the future or something like that, or the gods communicated with them through through this cup. Through this, if they drank from this cup, the god would give them a vision or something. One of their idols to give a vision or something like that. Okay. And of course, the silver cup, this cup of sanctification, should remind us of the cup, of the cup at the Seder of Passover, the Last Supper, when Messiah raised up the cup of sanctification as well. And and tradition had this idea, the Crusaders had the idea of a holy grail, that there was some special power to like divine, like this mentions here, because Messiah had, used that cup, had used the Kadush, this cup is a Kadush. But no, and they assumed it was silver, again, based, made of silver, based on this instruction, and, had these crusades to recover the Holy Grail. But who knows? There's nothing Scripture tells anything about it. It could have just been the regular cup and probably got destroyed. But nonetheless, that's where that ideal came from. So it's like it did a lot here about the silver cup, about this divining through it. Okay. And it's not that Joseph's divining it, but he's not letting on yet that he's not an Egyptian, because the Egyptians did that. As we continue on in verses 44, verse 17 through verse 7 through 13, we read the following. And they shall say unto him, whereso says my Lord these words? God forbid that your servant should do according to this thing. Behold, the money we found in our sack's mouth, we brought it again to you out of the land of Canaan. How then should we steal out of our Lord's house silver or gold? With whomsoever your servants it be found, let him die, and we will be your Lord's bondsmen. And he said, now let it be according to your words. He who is found shall be my servant, and you shall be blameless. They speedily took down every man his sack to the ground, opened every man his sack. And he searched and began at the eldest and left to the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. When they rent their clothes, and laid every man his ass and returned to the city. Okay, so that here he's speaking to his Joseph Stewart, okay? And it's the first time for that expression, God forbid. When they use it, when used correct like that, it's not misusing the name of God in some manner. It can be, because literally it says don't use his name casually. That's what it literally says in Hebrew. There's nothing casual about this. They are distressed. Now, they point out that they begin with this defense. Hey, we brought back the money that we thought was given to us mistake before, and we're gonna put it down. If we was interested in stealing, we would have kept the money, but they didn't. So now that they propose this thing, let the thief die, and the rest of us will be a slave. Well, that's not really in line with God's ways. Remember, we saw where God had given, where God said Abraham had walked in his statutes and commandments. The same statutes and commandments that were written down later when God gave the law through Moses to Israel. And what's that law say? It says if a man steals and he cannot repay, he has to be a servant for 6 years, and then goes free. He has to become the slave of the one he stole from. But the innocent are to be acquitted, and this is in line with what Joseph Stewart is saying. So there's some evidence here that Joseph has been teaching his steward how to walk in the ways of the Lord as well. So now, and again, notice the Otis would be Reuben to the youngest, Benjamin. And rent in their clothes, of course, a sign of mourning. So they return to the city. They're not running away. They're not trying to overpower the steward. They're not trying to. They're they want to resolve this issue, and they want to do it the right way. And Benjamin, it's a false. He appears to be guilty. The son of the right hand, who is also a picture of Messiah, as we mentioned before. We're going to continue on here. In Genesis 44 in verse 14 through 18, read the following. And Judah's brother came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there, and he fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said unto them, what deed is this that you have done? Know you not that such a man as I can certainly divine? And Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? How shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Behold, we are your Lord's servants, both we and he also whom the cup is found. He said, God forbid that I should do so. But the man whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. As for you, get you up in peace to your father. Then Judah came near to him and said, O Lord, not let your servant, I pray you, speak a word to my Lord's ear, and not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are even as Pharaoh. Okay, notice it's Judah and his brethren. What do we see? We see once again Judah demonstrating leadership, being a true leader. And notice he speaks to them. And notice again, now since what wouldn't kill him, wouldn't kill they'll all be the servant. And Joseph, just like his steward, says no, nothing doing. The rest of you, we're going to quit the innocent, and the guilty, having no way to repay, is going to be a slave. Again, in line with what would be written down later in the Torah. So now Judah is again stepping up to the plate, interceding for his brother. And notice about go up to peace unto your father. This is really about the father. They just don't recognize it. Now we continue on in Genesis 44, verses 19 to 24. I read the following. My Lord has asked his servants, saying, have you a father or a brother? And he said to them, we have a father, an old man, a child, a little one, and his brother is dead, and he is alone and left of his mother, and his father loves him. And you said unto your servants, bring him down to me, that I set my eyes upon him. And we said unto my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. And you said to your servants, except your youngest brother come down with you, shall see my face no more. And it came to pass, we came up with unto your servant, unto thy servant, my father, we told the words of my Lord. Okay, so notice the focus again is on the father here. And Judah's rehearsing the matter to the man. And again, left alone of his mother, the father loves him. Well, he loves all of his sons. So the idea he loves them above the others, okay? And he loves them above the others. I mean, Messiah is the firstborn of many brethren. But of course, there's a love for Messiah that's above that that there is for everyone else. And in the same way, you see this left of his mother. Well, remember, Joseph's 10 brothers came from these other mothers. And all Jacob had screwed them up in the way he raised them. And we talked about the children of Jacob. We saw how inclined they were to do what their father had done before before he wrestled with God and his name was changed. How they were inclined to trying to justify their actions, justify their families when they did wrong. How they were inclined, how they were deceitful and try to take matters in their own hands, and all these type things that their father had done beforehand. But Joseph and Benjamin had been raised. Joseph was only 6 when he turned, when Jacob walked away from all that in the seat and everything, and trying to handle things himself. And Benjamin was just a baby was born afterwards. So they're different than the rest of the people of Israel, the rest of the children of Israel. And so this youngest brother is the brother of Joseph. Just as believers have been are the first of many brethren. They're the brother of the suffering servant. They're like the son of the right hand, Benjamin. We'll continue on with that. Let's keep that in mind as we continue on here. In Genesis 44, verse 25 through 29, read the following. And our father said, "Go again and buy us a little food." And we said, "We cannot go down. If our youngest brother be with us, then we'll go down. We may not see the man's face, except our youngest brother be with us. And your servant, my father, said this, you know that my wife bare me 2 sons. The one went out from me, and I said, surely he is born in pieces. And I saw him not since. And if you take this ox from me, and mischief befall him, you shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave." Again, notice the focus is really on the father here. And they have to take him. And now notice, now here it is again. This time the father, here's what the father said. My 2 sons. Well, he had more than 2 sons. He had more than one wife. That favoritism we talked about. And that's part of what's brought this trouble on Benjamin. Not that Benjamin did anything, but favoritism. Well, if you show favoritism to one of your children, it will bring them trouble, even if they're innocent. It brought Joseph trouble, and it has set the stage for Benjamin to have trouble. Benjamin, didn't go in the first place, and that was Joseph's brother. He really wanted to see him, and now he's using this relationship between Benjamin and the father, son of the right hand, and the father, to get the attention of the father. And notice he's torn in pieces. I saw him not since. Joseph, the suffering servant, who later became savior of the world. As we talked about last week, what his Egyptian name means, literally savior of the world, who became ruler over everything here. A picture of Messiah. But he's left this earth and people have not seen him. And he was torn in pieces, not in little pieces, but torn when it was beaten with that whip, when he's in his crucifixion. Again, a picture of him. And the Jewish people will not see him again until they say to him, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. And only sorrow is going to cause them is going to cause them to come to him, as we're going to see as well with his father. We continue on in Genesis 44 in verses 30 through 34. Now, therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and the lad be not with us, seeing his life is bound up in the lad's life, it shall come to pass when he sees his father, the lad, that he will die. And your servant shall bring down the gray hairs of your servant our father with sorrow to the grave. For our servant, your servant became a surety to the lad for the lad under my father, saying, if I'll bring him down to you, then I shall bear the blame to my father forever. Now, therefore, I pray you, let your servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my lord, and let the land go up with his brethren. For how shall I go up to my father and the lad not be with me? Lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come upon my father. Notice the life of the father is bound up in the life of the son. And what were the words of Messiah? If you've seen the son, you've seen the father. That the light that the Messiah was the life was the light was the life of the Father, given the men to be a light unto men in the Gospel of John, chapter 1. The life, so the Son of the right hand is a picture of believers again. Besides Messiah, even believers, our life is hidden in Him. Our life is connected to the Father through Messiah. And notice here now, Jacob, this is still Judah speaking, a surety. Our surety is Messiah. He'll bear the blame forever. Messiah, not forever, but did bear our blame on the cross. And Judah's acting like a leader, and he's doing, and now he offers, he says, let me take his place. Just as Messiah took our place. Go up to the Father, and the lad not be with me. Messiah, if he had said, not your will, but my will be done, and return to the Father, he would not be able to bring us with him. He went again, this is a picture of Messiah as well. And Judah again showing himself to be the leader of his brethren, protecting his brethren, even at the cost of his own happiness, his own life. Okay, now we're going to go to Genesis 45. We're going to go to the next chapter in Genesis 45, verses 1-3, and look at Joseph's reaction to this. Very apparent change in Judah and his brothers. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before them that stood by him. And he cried, cause every man to go out from me. There stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known to his brethren. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said to his brethren, I am Joseph. Does my father yet live? His brother could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. Okay, remember this is Joseph, the dreams that God had spoken ahead of time, that they would bow to him, that he would rule over them, and they had rejected him. But now he's been made ruler. And he's revealing himself to them. And so also will Messiah, the suffering servant, rejected by the people of Israel, going to make himself made known to them. And notice how the house of Pharaoh, Joseph's house, remember, he's all connected to Pharaoh all the time. Pharaoh's house is near. But the Egyptians, the picture of the world, when Messiah makes himself known after they cry out, Baruch Hashem Adonai, the world is going to know. The tribes of this earth, the nation of this earth are going to tremble in fear. But first, they're troubled. The Jewish people here, that's who these are. These are the Jewish people here, the people of Israel, his brethren, his brethren according to the flesh. They're troubled at his presence, so will they be. We're told they're going to look upon him that pierced. They're going to mourn as if they mourn for their only son for 3 days. They're going to be troubled when he makes himself known to them, just as Joseph's brethren were troubled when he made himself known to them, and how the whole world heard, knew that something that knew about this. So awesome will the whole world know. And in Genesis 45, we continue on in verses 4-8. And Joseph said to his brother, "Come nearer to me, I pray you." And they came near, and he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved nor angered yourselves that you sold me to here. For God that sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years of the famine in the land, and there are yet 5 years in which there shall be neither earing nor harvest. And God sent before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So it was not you that sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt." Okay. So what do we see? They sold him into Egypt. And Egypt, again, being a picture of the world of the Gentiles. The Egyptians were Gentiles, right? Weren't circumcised, except. And Messiah, the suffering servant, was sold to the Gentiles. The vast majority of believers today are Gentiles. That, as Shaul said, to different groups at different times, you have judged yourself unworthy to Jewish people who rejected Messiah. You've judged yourself unworthy of eternal life. Lo, I turn to the Gentiles. It didn't mean forever. He said that more than one occasion. It just meant that group right there, but that pattern's the same. Remember, these Gentiles are calling him Savior, but they had rejected him. But this was all to preserve life. Before you to preserve life, not just their life, but the life of the Gentiles as well. In the same way, the cornerstone that the rulers rejected, God made the one the rulers rejected, God made the chief cornerstone. This rejection had to happen to bring about the salvation. Two years of famine, these 5 years. Again, 5, speaking of grace. And there's going to be, and now preserved to who? The Jewish posterity, a remnant. And the remnant of the Jewish people have always been preserved. And the remnant have always followed Messiah as well. And to save their lives by a great deliverance. He saved their life eternally by a great deliverance on the cross. The suffering servant Messiah did. But he also is going to save their life by a great deliverance, a great deliverance when they're surrounded by all the nations the Antichrist deceived, and they have no, and it appears they have no hope, and they call out, Baruch Hashem Adonai. He's going to come out. He's going to crack the sky. He's going to come with the armies of heaven, with angels and the believers dressed in white robes. And the Spirit of God is going to move in the people of Israel as well. And those situations are going to be totally turned around. So he has been sent before to preserve them. He's been sent before the Jewish people to preserve them and keep them a remnant. And and even though people have tried to exterminate them like Hitler, no one's ever been successful anywhere. The best they could do is expel them to send them somewhere else. And even then, there were people. There were undoubtedly ones who remained, and to save their lives. And this has all been the work of God. This is the work of God. Everything that's happened to Joseph, they were his tools and just did not know it. God gave Joseph the dream before any of this ever occurred, because he knew they'd reject the dream and act the way they did, which would bring it about. Again, those who do not know biblical prophecy are doomed to fulfill it. Now, last, I want to draw your attention here, a father to Pharaoh. In Isaiah, Messiah is called the everlasting father. He represents the father to the world until the new heaven and the new earth. And not only, but also this thing about a father to Pharaoh indicates something about Pharaoh, the man himself, being younger than Messiah. Remember, Josiah or Yoshia, if you want to go with the Hebrew, what the king became king at 8 years of age. This was not uncommon when they had a dynasty in the lineage like that. A right to rule by birth, a birthright to rule, and so Messiah. So this indicates as Joseph, if he's a father to Pharaoh, that Pharaoh's not older than him; he's older than Pharaoh. And we don't know how young Pharaoh. We don't have any young Pharaoh was when Joseph came into the scene and stood before him. But it appears not to have been too old himself. Now we continue on in Genesis 45, verses 9 to 13. Haste you and go up to my father and say unto him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me and tarry not. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen. You shall be near unto me, you and your children and your children's children, your flocks and your herds and all that you have. And there I'll nourish you, for there are yet 5 years of famine, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, in the eyes of my brother Benjamin, it is my mouth that speaks unto you. You shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and all you've seen. He shall haste and bring my father down here. Okay, so what? There's several things in here. We're gonna start here with this land of Goshen. Notice the land of Goshen at the beginning. First mention of it. Joseph's already picked out this place for him. Why? Well, one reason, it's near him, but there's a deeper reason. It takes a little understanding of geography. Remember, the greater promised land, the promised land that Messiah would come through, was the land of Canaan. The Bible's very specific about that, and we showed this explicitly before in a previous lesson. But the greater promised land went further and went all the way to the brook of Egypt, as it's called one place. And what that is the Nile River divides into 7 smaller rivers and forms the delta of Egypt before it dumps into the Mediterranean Sea. That one closest to Israel, easternmost, is where the land of Goshen was. And remember, where you set your foot on, he would give it to possession. That's inside the boundaries of the promised land, of the greater promised land. So this land of Goshen, that's why the land of Goshen in particular. And there's some more benefits to the land of Goshen, but the main thing is that's inside the boundaries of the greater promised land promised to Abraham and his descendants, not just the descendants of Isaac and the descendants of Israel. Now, notice this. Now notice this. God's made me Lord over all of Egypt. He recognizes the hand of God. But now that he's made Lord, what? The fathers to come down. And this reminds us in Corinthians, where Shaul, the Apostle Paul, tells us that after Messiah's put down every enemy and so on and so forth, and the world is all in subject to him, he's going to hand it over to the Father. The Father then is going to come down the new heaven and new earth and dwell among men. So there's a picture here of this, you see. And notice there's 2 witnesses here. Your eyes, and notice how Benjamin is singled out. Benjamin, the son of my right hand, a picture a picture of that remnant of the Jewish people who have accepted Messiah, and there's always been some throughout history. I've studied massive amounts of history, and throughout history, there's never a time where there's not some Jewish people who recognize Yeshua as Messiah. It didn't die from the days of the apostle. It is contiguous and has never ended. Contiguous means there's no break in it. Just in case you know what that word means, there's no break at all. But the Jewish people themselves also are witnesses. Today, there's even rabbis in Israel who have looked at the historical evidence and concluded Jesus, Yeshua, rose from the dead. They reject him as Messiah because he doesn't fulfill the expectations given to them in the Talmud. Not the Talmud, the Orator, which is the Mishnahs, the commandments, the traditions of the elders, and the Gemara, the Gemara, which is the commentary on the tradition of the command of the order, and they made expectations about Messiah that are not found in the Torah. They're not found in the Tanakh at all. They're not found in the Torah. They're not found in the Nevi'im, the Nevi'im as the prophets. They're not found in the Ketuvim, which is the writings, which is the rest of what people call the Old Testament. The Tanakh means the same thing as people call the Old Testament. So, but they reject him, but they still witness. They still bear witness, and Jewish people who rejected him, this whole idea of him being Messiah, will still acknowledge, however reluctantly, that he was indeed Jewish. They can find nothing. They've tried to discredit his genealogy, given them Matthew and stuff, and they've never been able to do so. So those two witnesses are there, but this speaks of a time to come when all the Jewish people are going to be witnesses that Yeshua is Messiah, not just a remnant. And that's going to bring about the Father coming down to be among men, to be among the Gentiles as well. Now we continue on in Genesis 45, verses 14 through 18. And he fell on his brother's Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed his brother and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. The fame there was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers are come. And it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say unto your brethren, this do you, lay your beast, and go and get you up into the land of Canaan. And take your fire and your households and come to me, and I'll give you the good of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. Okay, so again, notice he starts with Benjamin, but he doesn't end there. And remember, Benjamin's a picture of, again, just we discussed, of that remnant of the Jewish people who accepted him. First him, then when the rest come to accept him, all of Israel will be saved, as Shaul tells us, in Romans. I believe it's Romans 10. All of Israel will be saved. Then they're all going to weep, as we mentioned, and they're going to talk with him, and they're going to accept him as rule. The suffering servant, they're going to accept his rule, and it's going to bring him great joy. Now, the Pharaoh, they hear it, and look at Pharaoh's reaction. Take your father. Notice he takes his father again, separated out, and your households, and you're going to eat the good of the land. You're going to eat the good of the land. Life's going to be good for you. Because and we'll see what's going to make life so good for him. But Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, has already promised it. And we'll see how this comes about as we continue on today's lesson. In Genesis 45, verse 19 to 23, we read the following, some more words, starting with some more words of Pharaoh. Now that you are commanded, do you. Take your commandment, your wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones, for your wives, and bring your father and come. And regard not your stuff, for all the land of Egypt is yours. The children of Israel did so in Egypt, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for the way. To all of them he gave each man changes of raiment. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. To his father he sent after this manner 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt, 10 she asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. Okay, so now wagons, and notice again, he mentions his father in particular. Remember, his father cannot, remember, his hip was thrown out of socket. A dislocated hip is what we'd say today. Never healed up. God left him with a painful reminder so he would never again go back in deception and try to take matters into his own hands. A painful daily reminder to keep him on the right path. And some of you may have some trouble, kind of like Shaul's thorn in the flesh he talked about, where you just something you just can't seem to get rid of. And you're asking God to take it from you. Well, God's maybe not going to do so, because maybe he's looking out for your long-term good. The only way to keep you on the right path is you need that daily painful reminder to keep you from straying. He's got your good in mind, as he did with Jacob's. Well, because of that, Jacob cannot walk to Egypt. He cannot walk to Egypt. He's gonna have to go. He's gonna have to have this wagon to carry him. And also, the wagon's not for their stuff. Notice, just leave all your furniture except behind. Don't even worry about it. You can come here and pick out whatever you want. So they're doing what they said. So they're doing as he said. But notice again, each man changes of raiment. New clothes speak of what? A new beginning. You know, all the believers are going to be given robes of white. All things have become new. All things have become new. The old has passed away. They're no longer going to be dressed in the clothing, in the type of clothing they were wearing when they rejected him. But now are going to be giving new clothing. And Benjamin, again, grace 5 times again as much. There's those people who are physically part of the descendants of the people of Messiah, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, physically, who accept Messiah's rule, are given grace, and they're going to be placed way above the brethren who rejected him until they finally cried out, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. And notice these 300 pieces of silver. Well, that's 10 times as much as, Judas was given to betray Messiah. Of course, speaks of the law and that betrayal as well. But also 300 pieces of silver was roughly a year's wages. That's roughly how many days a common wage earner earned a piece of silver a day. And commonly they worked 300 days a year. They took, just like today, people take a couple of days off in a week and maybe a couple of weeks off, for holidays or whatever, or vacation. So this is a year's wages. Okay. He gave him a significant amount of money here. And notice these 10 asses and 10 asses and she asses. So a pairs, male and female, just like we saw before. The good things of Egypt. And notice corn, meat, and food for his father, by the way. So, and again, those 10 10 makes you again think of the 10 commandments as well. Okay. And how I'll make you wise and understanding people and bring the blessing of God upon you if you keep them. Well, we continue on in Genesis 45 verses 24 through 28. And he sent his brother away, and they departed. He said to them, see that you fall not out by the way. And they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, he is a governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he said to them, and he spoiled the wagons that Joseph sent to him. And the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, it is enough. My son is alive. I will go and see him before I die. Okay, well, first of all, I want you to notice first thing he remember Joseph, the suffering servant, a picture of Messiah. He tells him what? Don't fall out by the way. See that you don't fall out. Don't get distracted. It reminds of the words, stay on task, is what he's telling him. Remember, he'd given an evil report about some of his brothers before, how they had there was a report of they're basically implied from the text they were goofing off or something, and weren't really taking care of the sheep the way they should have. So but there's a message to us: don't fall out by the way. Don't get off the path. Don't get distracted by the world. It speaks to that warning that Messiah gives us in Luke 21, in verse 34, where he warns us not to get caught up in the cares of this world, eating and drinking the cares of this world. But if we want to escape the snare, it's going to come upon all the earth, as he says. We have to watch and pray and be counted worthy to escape all these things and stand before him. And escaping all these things, stand before him, ties into we meet him in the air. We're going to stand before him. And what we're going to do, we're going to escape all these things. The snare is going to follow the earth, the tribulation. But the key point is to not be distracted. We're in this world. We have to deal with it, but we're not to be entangled in this world. We're to keep on point, be about the Father's business as Messiah was. And this is what, and be about the business that God has set us to, which is what Joseph is telling his brothers. Don't let yourselves be sidetracked, because they've done this before. So notice how they obey him and they go to them. Now Joseph is yet alive, and he's governor over all the land of Egypt. His father, he was dead to his father, but now he's alive again and ruler over all the land, over the world, the land of Egypt. Egypt being a picture of the world, and he believes it not, at least at first. And so also the Jewish people today in Israel and throughout the world, by and large, do not believe that Messiah is yet alive. He's rose again, and he is gonna, and he's been made the ruler over all the earth, over all the Egypt, the land of the Egypt, the land of the Gentile, over all these Gentiles. But now he's going to, but after he looks at the evidence, he's revived. And remember, the spirit of Jewish people is going to be revived. They're revived when Messiah comes. That spirit of God's going to fall on them, and they are going to join in. And we're told that the weakest man in Judah will be like David, and the house of David will be like God in this battle. The spirit of God revives them. Now, Israel here doesn't appear he plans to stay in Egypt. I will go and see him before I die. It kind of implies a short visit, but that's not to be. And we're gonna see why he was only wanting to make a short visit. Comes out to us very clearly here in Genesis 46 verses 1 through 4. And Israel took his journey with all he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifice to unto the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke unto Israel by vision in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Hanani, here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of your father. Fear not to go down to Egypt, for I'll make of you a great nation. I'll go down with you into Egypt, and I'll surely bring you up again. And Joseph shall put his hands upon your eyes. Okay. So he came to Beersheba and he made sacrifices to God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's got this journey with all he has. And notice, do not fear to go down to Egypt. He was afraid. He didn't want to stay in Egypt. Why? Abraham had went there and Isaac had went there. They left it. They got outside the bounds of the promised land. Got outside the boundary of Canaan, outside the land of their calling, and they got in trouble. He wants to see Joseph, but he was afraid to stay in Egypt because God called him to the promised land, but now God's calling him to Egypt. And he'll make you a great nation. Again, Egypt is a picture of the world, and the Jewish people have left the promised land, have been put out of it at the time of the Romans. Before the Assyrians carried part. Some returned, some didn't. The Babylonians, some returned, some didn't. And the Romans put them out. In the day, some have returned and some haven't. But God sent them into but in the world, they became a great nation. In fact, we're told that an exodus is coming from the north that eclipses the exodus from Egypt. The Jewish people who've been scattered have become a great nation that no one really knows the number of, like the stars of the sky, like the stars of the sky, like the sands of the seashore, innumerable. The best guess is 1/10 of the world's this from the rabbinate in Israel said this about 6 years ago. That they believe that perhaps 1/10 of the world's Jewish people are what they know or what they know. That really could be as high as 70 million people. They just really don't know because there is no way of knowing. Only God knows the answer. Indeed, a great nation. I mean, think about 70 million people. It's a fifth the size of the U.S. It's quite a bit for one ethnic group. So he's going to go down with him into the world, into Egypt. And in the scattering, he's going to be with him. And so God has been with the Jewish people in their scattering. Yes, they've suffered like the Holocaust stuff, but that remnant's always been there. And he will surely bring them back up again. He will surely return them. We've only seen a remnant return. But it's all gonna be returned eventually. All will be gathered. All will be gathered after the people in Jerusalem, starts in Jerusalem, except Messiah. Say to him, Baruch Hashem Adonai. And Joseph, the suffering servant, a picture of Messiah, is going to open their eyes, put his hand upon their eyes so they can see things they really are. Instead of walking his statutes and commandments. Now here, Joseph putting upon his eyes is talking about Joseph closing the eyes of Jacob in death. So God is letting Jacob know he wants him to go to Egypt, not for a visit, but stay there the rest of his life. But he will be brought back up again to the promised land. Nonetheless, even though Joseph's going to close his eyes in Egypt, And we'll look at some more. We'll talk some more about that next week. Now, in Genesis 46, verses 5 through 8, read the following. And Jacob went up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob, their father, and their little ones, and their wives, in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They took their cattle and their goods, which they'd gotten in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his seed with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughter and his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his seed brought he with him into Egypt. And these are the names of the children of Egypt, of Israel, which came into Egypt, Jacob and his sons, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn. Okay, he's gone up from the well of seven, the well of covenant. Okay, they made this where a covenant had been made between Abraham and Abraham, made by Abraham concerning this well, that well that Isaac had recovered. And notice they carried Jacob, their father. He cannot walk properly. He cannot walk without a staff, so they carry him, and they put him in the wagons, along with their wives and the little ones. The men themselves are on foot. They're out here herding the cattle. And cattle here in King James means livestock. They're out there, and they're going there. And notice who's with him. His sons, grandsons, his daughters, his sons' daughters. Notice daughters plural again. I mentioned this last week. In all his seed, he brought them into Egypt. He has other daughters. We just don't know who their names are. We know Dinah because, she's singled out because she was born into Leah, and also because of the things we talked about when we talked about Jacob's children. And she was, she did not behave well. We're just without going. But notice again how Reuben here is singled out as Jacob's firstborn. And firstborn has the birthright and the blessing. It's theirs to lose. The birthright, again, and we'll show this next week in more detail. A right to the double portion of inheritance and the blessing, the right to rule over his brethren after his father is gone. That's Reuben's who all that belonged to. Now we'll see how it pans out next week. But it was his to lose. But he hadn't been acting. He's been acting like a weak leader at best. And Judah's been acting like a strong leader. So we're going to continue on here. And we're going to read about these descendants of Jacob here in Genesis 46, verses 9 through 15. And the sons of Reuben, Hanok, Palul, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Yemuel, Yamin, Ohad, Yachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanitish woman. The sons of Levi, Gershom, and Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah, and Onan, and Shelah, and Pharez, and Zerah. But and Onan died in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Pharez were Hezron and Hamul. And the sons of Issachar, Tola and Phuvah, and Job, and Shimron. And the sons of Zebulun, Sered, and Elon, and Yaliel. And these are the sons of Leah, which she bare to Jacob and Padan Aram, with his daughter Dinah. All the souls of his sons and his daughters were 33. Okay. This one we're given his daughter here. She's being counted here. It's 33. Through Leah. Leah herself, the sins through Leah herself are 33. Almost half of the descendants he's going to list here. Now, there's a few we're going to bring out. Hanukkah. It's that same as Enoch. I've been translated as Enoch again. Not the same one as the Enochs we looked at, the Hanoks we looked at before. the one the sin of Cain and one the sin of Sheth. Now, also worth bringing out here is Job. This is not Job from the book of Job. He's over in the east of Israel. This is Egypt, south of Israel. Okay, just to clarify that in case someone tells you there, you get that thought. It's not. Now, Perez breach. Remember, breach. His sons are listed. Well, these others perhaps had sons. Why are they not listed? Most, why these? Because this is who Messiah comes from, and it clarifies for his and Onan aren't there. So Amul and Ezra and Yamul are taking their place, or so in a way. Really, Perez and Zara took their place. So we're told this. So there's 33 counting Dinah. And we'll see in a moment why I bring that up. 32 men plus her. Now, we continue on. We continue on Genesis 46, verse 16 through 22. The sons of Gad, Ziphion, and Haggai, and Shuni, and Ezron, and Eri, and Arodi, and Areli. The sons of Asher, Yimna, and Ishua, and Isui, and Beriah, and Sarah, their sister. And the sons of Berai, Eber and Machiel. And the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave unto Leah his daughter. These sons she bare unto Jacob 16 sows. These she bare unto Jacob even 16 sows. The son of Rachel, Leah, Jacob's wife, Joseph and Benjamin. And unto Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On, bare unto him. And the sons of Benjamin were Bela and Becher and Ashbel and Gera and Naamah and Ehi and Rosh and Mupim and Hupim and Ard. And these are the sons of Rachel, which were born to Jacob. All the sows were 14. Okay, so 16 and 33 earlier, we mentioned. We mentioned that makes 49. Team Rachel, Team Leah has 49. Rachel has 14. On team Rachel, because remember Zilpah was Leah's handmaiden that bore children on her behalf. So they're counted. So okay, so we 7 sons of Gad, 7 descendants of Asher is 14. Male descendants. If you count the male descendants, you'll find there's 14. It's not counting Sarah here in this case. Just to make that. And Gad and Asher themselves make 16 altogether. Okay, so down here now in Joseph. So down here now, Team Rachel has 14. And of course, Joseph is mentioned here. And that priest and that being married into the priest of On is important. We'll look at that again later. Now we continue on in Genesis 46 and verse 23 through 28. And the sons of Dan, Hushim. And the sons of Naphtali, Jazael, and Guni, and Guni, and Yezer, and Shittim. And the sons of Bilhah, which Laban gave to Rachel's daughter, and she bare these unto Jacob. All the sows were 7. And the souls that came to Egypt, which came out of the woman, besides Jacob's sons' wives, all the sows were 66. And the sons of Joseph, which were born him in Egypt, were 2 sows. All the house of Jacob, which came to Egypt, were 70. And he sent Judah before unto Joseph, direct his face to Goshen, and they came to the land of Goshen. Okay, now if you've been following along, Team Rachel here has 21. Team Leah has 49. That's 70. Okay, well, there's 70 here, but notice 70 minus Joseph and his two sons would be 67. You got 66. Dinah's not counted. Now it's counting just the men. Jacob is being counted. So counting Jacob, there's 70 men, not their wives. And I meant to mention this a minute ago here, that one of these men appears to have had two wives, the son of a Canaanitish woman. Okay, well, a lot of them, they had to marry someone. At best they could do was married one of the slaves in their own camp. Other than that, they had to marry someone who was Canaanitish. And we already saw how Judah had done that and so on and so forth. But so this is 70 men, and these 70 men is the same as we looked in Genesis 10 in the table of nations there, how there's 70 root nations. And it's a picture of all of mankind going into sin, because Egypt's a picture of sin as well as a picture of the world. And so now they're going into the land of Goshen. We're going to learn some more about the land of Goshen and why Joseph so, as why he wants them there, not just because it's close to him, which he's mentioned, but also I explained the geography, but there's another reason as well, which is going to come out here. In Genesis 46, verse 29 through 34, read the following. And Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, to Goshen, and presented himself unto him. He fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said to Joseph, let me die, as I've seen your face, because you are yet alive. And Joseph said to his brethren unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, my brother and my father's house from the land of Canaan are come unto me. And the men are shepherds, for their trade has been to feed cattle. They brought their flocks and their herds, all they have. It shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, what is your occupation? That you shall say, your servant trade has been about cattle all our youth, even now, both we and our fathers, that we may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. Okay, so now, father and son have been Joseph and his father have been reunited. His father says, it's enough. He's ready to die now, but not quite yet for him. He's going to see some more before we'll look at that in more detail next week. But it's not yet time for him. He's going to go to his father. Now he's going to say he tells them to tell them that they're shepherds and make a point of this, and they need pasture land because they need to dwell in the land of Goshen. Again, the land of Goshen, the brook of Egypt, inside that greater promised land we talked about, right there on the border, right there in the Nile. But also, why would they be there? Because they're shepherds. The shepherds are an abomination to the Egyptians. Now, why were shepherds an abomination to the Egyptians, you might wonder? Well, some of it goes back to their worship of Ra, whose symbol was a lamb. And of course, when you raise sheep, you know anything about lambs tend to be born in pairs, eventually run out of land, and all you can do is call the sheep, which is to say you've got to get rid of and kill some of the lambs. That's why the lamb's what's primarily sowed. Lamb of the first year, it's primarily sowed in stores and whatever, is because if you don't, you're going to overgraze the land and the whole flock will die. Okay. So that's one reason. But beyond that, it's more than just that. Egypt was the most sophisticated place on earth at the time. The Egyptians, were better educated in general, except and somewhat cosmopolitan. And they're going to become more so, we're going to see here as we go along. And shepherds were seen as uneducated, you know, uneducated and rural and you know, they've been out there living in tents. You know, today that'd be like the equivalent of living in trailers, you know. And the Egyptians kind of just looked upon shepherds as like uneducated, you know, hillbillies, you know, trailer trash. Where I grew up, people would say, you know, would say that, you know. My mother lived in a trailer park, so I'm not, you don't like that term. Well, you're just going to deal with it because, you know, you know that's kind of I'm just speaking the way the Egyptians looked upon them, the same way some people look upon people who live in trailers and live out in the country and stuff as uneducated and so on and uneducated, you know, and trailer trash and whatever else, and you know think they're better than them basically because they got a better education, etc. So they don't want. So Joseph knows that if Pharaoh knows this as well, and because the Egyptians don't like the shepherds, they don't want them living among them. They can live in their land, but they want them separated from them. And you know, and you often see this today among Jewish people. They've historically moved to places, and wherever they went, they had to be moved off separate and end up forming communities that were separate from everyone else. So even though they're in the land, say in the like Crown Heights in New York City area, okay, for example, or whatever, where it's basically they, they're brought in, even invited in, but they have to remain separate because people don't understand them, they don't like them, etc. And you know, and they got that same mentality. People, urban people, often today in America, there's a real divide between urban and rural. It's probably the biggest divide in America. It's bigger than the divide between African American and European American, or anything like that. You look at a political map, look at a county map or a precinct map, and see how people voted, and you'll see all the urban, all the big urban centers one color, and even inside of a state that maybe went that color, and all the areas outside of it the other color on the you know on like I say a presidential election map or something. There's a real divide between them, and there was a real divide here. And this is the key. So they're in the world, they're in Egypt, but they're not part of Egypt. They're not going to be integrated into Egypt and assimilated out of existence. Where Pharaoh, where Joseph, they didn't recognize him as a Hebrew, as a Hebrew. The gent as a Hebrew, he's been made in the image of a Gentile. That's not going to happen to them. Joseph is making sure of that by putting them in this, being, letting them know they're shepherds will assure that. Now we continue on in 47 verses 1 through 4, and we're going to see how this works out for Joseph. This plan here, and I will say divinely inspired by God as well, because it all fits in with the will of God. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh, verse 47, verse 1 through 4. Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brother and their flocks and their herds, all they have are come out of the land of Canaan. And behold, they're in the land of Goshen. He took some of his brother and even 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to his brethren, what is your occupation? They said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, both we also and our fathers. They moreover said to Pharaoh, go and sojourn in the land, for to sojourn in the land we are come. For your servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the land is sore in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, we pray you, let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. Okay. So, they're in the land of Goshen. 5 men. What? Joseph didn't bring all 12. Well, we'll see why. What about these 5 that stood out in a moment? But again, a picture of grace here, okay? He picked the five that we're going to. It's gonna work in his favor here. He's gonna bring grace. And notice that they say they need the land of Goshen for pasture land. Okay, well, there's that east wind, that drought we talked about, but there's grass in the land of Goshen. Remember, Pharaoh said they can have the best of the land. Well, this is the best of the land for what they do. And the reason why is that Nile River. It's watering the ground, it's watering the grass from underneath. So even though crops won't grow, the grains, this grass will still grow. And sheep can eat very low grass, by the way. It doesn't have to be very big at all for sheep and goats to eat. Cattle require some taller grass, except but. So therefore, now they're appealing because they brought their flocks and herds with them to let them be where the pasture land is. And again, they identified that they're shepherds, and Joseph and Pharaoh knows the people of Egypt don't like shepherds, and they'll have trouble if they live among them. And he's not trying to bring them trouble. So he continued, and also I want you to notice we're going to sojourn here. Sojourn, that means short-term visit. Okay, they have the plan of not staying in Egypt permanently, because remember what Abraham had said. I mean, God had told Abraham before and just told their father. Now we continue on. Genesis. So they're going to return to the promised land. Now we continue on Genesis 40 and 45, 47, in verses 5 through 7. And Jacob said to Joseph, your father brother coming to you. The land of Egypt for you, in the best land make your father brother dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell. If you know any men of activity among them, make them rulers over my cattle. And Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Okay, there's really a lot here in these few short verses. But I want you to know some things outstanding. Your father and your brethren. Messiah's father, the Lord, his brother, the Jewish people are coming to you. Are coming the Father. The best of all the world is going to bring tribute to Jerusalem. Israel's going to be lifted above all their nations. Again, that picture. But notice this here. Men of activity. Remember, Joseph had given it was introduced in 17. He gave a bad report of some of his brothers. They weren't doing his job their jobs I mentioned. That's who he brought with him. Men of activity. And they're going to take care of Pharaoh's cattle as well. Now, notice this thing here. Jacob is set before him, and Jacob, even though it's not mentioned, undoubtedly him and his mother, who was probably Zilpah, probably Bilhah, who had married, who had been Rachel's, Raquel or Rachel's handmaid, probably was about, because everyone had to bow before him. We saw before, so that the picture was complete. The sun and the stars and the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowing before him, and the connection to grain, as we mentioned before. So now we see this has happened, and he's bringing in these, and he's let them know. He's brought in the 5 that were men of activity. The 5 that have shown themselves to be doing well. Now, this thing with Joseph is Jacob is kind of is a little strange here in a way, though, because he's already bowed to Joseph, probably bowed before Pharaoh, but now what? Jacob blesses blesses Pharaoh. I'm sorry, and we read we read in Hebrews talking about Melchizedek and Abraham, that when Melchizedek blessed Abraham, it says without contradiction, the blesser is greater than the one that gets blessed. Pharaoh is submitting himself to Jacob. Jacob is blessing Pharaoh. Pharaoh's what? Ruler of this Gentile nation, a picture of the whole world. The whole world's had to come there because of this famine and set. It's the most fit. And they're being blessed by who? Jacob, a picture of the Jewish people. And remember, when the Jewish people return to Messiah, we're told in Romans, it'll be like life from the dead for the Gentiles. The rejection of him made it possible for them to be grafted in, and to be safe from eternal death. But the world is on, no flesh would survive if it wasn't for if Messiah didn't cut the tribulation short for the elect's sake, the Jewish people, and to be life from the dead when they accept him. And this is what's going on. The Jewish people were meant to be a blessing to the Gentiles. And Jacob, and that's what's being pictured here, Jacob blessing Pharaoh. Again, the greater, without contradiction, blesses the lesser. And Pharaoh's submitting to this, recognizing him. And we continue on here. Because he knows Jacob's connected to the God of Israel. Now we continue on here in Genesis 47 in verses 8 through 12. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How old are you?" And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, "The days of my pilgrimage were 130 years. Few and evil have been the years of my life. My life have been. Have not attained to the years of the life of my father in the days of their pilgrimage." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. And Jacob placed his father and his brother. Joseph placed his father and his brother and gave them possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh commanded. And Joseph nourished his father and his brother and all his father's household with bread according to their families. Okay, first thing I want you to notice is 130 years old. 130 years old. He says, "Few and evil have been the days of his life," and he's not attaining the life of his fathers. Remember, he's only 130 at this point. I say only because his father, Abraham, lived 175. Isaac lived 180. Okay, he's 45, 50 years short of that. So, and he'd been evil, full of trouble. Now, he's saying here is he brought that trouble on himself. As we saw, when his brother came to him, he was hungry. Now, of course, his brother's exaggerating, "I'm going to die." But he was hungry. He took advantage of him to try to bring in his own strength what God had already promised. And paybacks were terrible. And he deceived his father. And paybacks were terrible. And those paybacks went all the way through last lesson we saw. In fact, even right now, he's been grieved up to the point where he comes down to see Joseph. He's been bereaved of Benjamin all this time till they come back and bring him to Joseph. And paybacks have been terrible. They've lasted. Well, Esau married when he was 40 after the incident with the beans. So, they've been going on for 90 plus years, these paybacks. 90 years of trouble plus years of trouble have come upon him. And we see Jacob blessing Pharaoh once again. And going out from Pharaoh. Messiah came and blessed the world and has went out from the world. So now we see this, and according to their family, so they're all nourished and taken care of. It's good. But this 130 years has another significance, which I'm going to show you. We read in Galatians that when Abraham entered the promised land, until the law was given, was 430 years. Here, the promised land, at year 2083, because we were told he was 75 years when he entered the promised land. Year 2083 from what started from when Adam was formed out of the dust, plus 430 years equals 2,513. That's when the Exodus is going to happen. That's 430 years. Half of that is 215 years. And what it actually says is 400, and later when Isaac confirmed as a seed, 400 years, you'll wander in a land that's not your own, and be enslaved by another nation. the nation I'll judge, so on and so forth. That 400 years is those two things combined together. It's the same as that 430 years. Now, when Jacob, when Joseph, when Jacob, the house of Israel moved to Egypt here, is 115 years. Abraham died. Abraham died when Jacob was 15. So the 115. So that would make that would Jacob. Yeah, Abraham died when Jacob was 15. Okay, when he was 15. That was 100 years after he entered the promised land. Now 130 years after that, Jacob moves in here. 215 years that went by. Exactly half of that 230 years, 430 years, was spent in the land of Canaan. The other half's going to be spent in the land of Egypt. And not all of it in slavery. No one's in slavery yet, okay? And we'll talk some more about that. But I want you to notice this is significant for that reason. It's the halfway point between Abraham entering the promised land and the Exodus. Now, as we look at our last section here, we're going to look at Joseph's dealing with the Egyptians and how and what a great service he's really doing to Pharaoh here. And there was no land, no bread in all the land. The salmon was very sore, so the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt, in the land of Canaan, for the corn which they bought, and Joseph brought the money unto Pharaoh's house. And when the money fell in the land of Egypt, in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread. Why should we die in your presence? For the money fails." And Joseph said, "Give your cattle. I'll give you for your cattle if money fell." They brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses, for flocks, and for the cattle of the herds, and for the asses. And he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. Okay, 2 years of famine had gone by, and the problem is for the Egyptians, they've run out of money. They've been buying money. They've been buying money all this time. And of course, we mentioned before, when food gets in short supply, the price goes up. Because remember, it's not just them, the land of Canaan as well. And people from other nations as well have been going to Egypt to buy grain, to buy. So, there's high demand, low supply. Prices went up. Now they're out of money. So Joseph agrees to have says, all right, I'll give you more grain, but now you got to give me all your livestock. So that takes care of them for a year. But remember, there's 5 now there's 4 more years of famine coming. It's not done, so there's another problem here. We're going to continue on here in Genesis 47, verse 18 through 22. When that year it was ended, they came to the second year and said to him, "We shall hide it from you, my lord. How our money is spent, my lord said also as our herds of cattle. There's not left in the there's not aught left in our sight of my lord, but our bodies and our lands. Wherefore should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us our land for bread, and we and our lands will be servants of the Pharaoh, and give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate." And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For the Egyptians sowed every man in his field, because the famine prevailed on them. So the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, removed from the cities from one end of the borders of Egypt, even to the other end thereof. Only the land of the priests bought he not, for the priests of the portion assigned them Pharaoh, and they eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they sowed not their lands. Okay, so now now they have another problem. Year 3's gone by. A second year after they came the first time. And now they're out of money and they're out of cattle. All the only choice thing, all they can do is give them their land. They have their land, have nowhere to live, and they and become as slaves to be fed. So first of all, Joseph deals with the land. We'll talk about them. They're offered to be the servants, the slaves of Pharaoh in a little bit next. But notice he deals with their land, and the land becomes Pharaoh's. Well, he doesn't need all these people on that land. He won't even produce anything. They have no function out there. So what does he do? He gathers them into cities. And this process happens all the time. Cities are clearance houses when you got too many people for the land. We talked about the urban attitude earlier. Well, when you the thing about people live in the cities is they're really in a bad situation. They just don't know it sometimes. They think they're too sophisticated. They blinded themselves to this. And what I mean is that land eventually will take care of you. Sure, they got famine going on, but it's not going to last forever. And you know, the land gives them some independence. And historically, farmers have been much more independent than city dwellers. Why? They're not dependent upon the government except to take care of them. Why? Because they have land, and the land can take care of them. And landlessness in the Bible is presented often as a great evil. Well, these people have all become landless. And here in America, we've had families who for 5, maybe 10 generations who've never owned any land. They've been in cities renting all that time. When you buy land, when you have land, at least you have land, something to show for it. So that you can take care of. There's much food in the soil of the poor. They have to go out there and work to get it. But when you're in cities, you're totally dependent upon other people for everything. You know, if you're in a situation, sometimes you hear urbanites complain about, like, one of the complaints they have about Oklahoma is the lack of public transportation in our cities, which are Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Well, yeah, they're top 50 cities in the U.S. It's true, but they're not all packed together. They're spread out, and public transportation is not very practical. And the truth is, people out here in Oklahoma don't want public transportation, don't need it. But these people in these cities don't have cars often. They have to rely on the public for transportation. They have to rely on the public for food. They have to rely on the government, as it were, really, for housing, etc. So Joseph has clearanced these Egyptians into the cities. Well, they can be taken care of better in the cities. They've also have lost their independence. And this pattern today has a real relevancy. There's a group of billionaires who advertise on the internet. You can't call it conspiracy when someone advertises it on the internet. They themselves advertise what they call the Great Reset. And what they want to do in the Great Reset, their slogan is, by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. And be happier. Their whole thing is clearance everyone they can into these cities, isolate them from the country, maybe even tear up roads to do so. And no one owns anything. They live in an apartment. They have an apartment in a building, and maybe at the bottom floor they have a convenience store and a barber shop and some things like that. And they can walk to everywhere or use public transportation to get everywhere they need to go. And they have absolute no independence. Now, this is really so great on not owning anything. Why is it billionaires the ones out trying to do this? They certainly don't believe in not owning nothing. But that is exactly what's happened with a lot of these people here. They now are in these cities where arguably maybe someone owns a building, the others rent it or whatever. They don't own any means to take care of themselves. They are now very dependent upon Pharaoh, just like a slave is dependent upon its master for food, clothing, and shelter, and everything else. With those the priest, it's not that way with them. Why? Because they haven't had to buy food. Because Pharaoh's already assigned it for them. They're in agreement. And these are the religious leaders, right? And of course, it's worth noting that this also applied to the people in the land of Goshen, the children of Israel, because Pharaoh also assigned a portion of them. So they're not being brought into this new form of slavery, as it were, of being made landless near the priest nor. And Joseph's married into their family. The reason Pharaoh told him to marry, gave him the daughter of the priest of On to marry. Okay, got that social connection. But notice this also. As I mentioned there's this religious aspect. These religious leaders, okay, that there's religious leaders who are not who again, they're who they're talking, who's their congregants, as it were. These people who now own nothing, we're told they're going to be happier. And so today we have religious leaders who support this, but you look at their lives themselves. Well, you see huge mansions, private jets, so on and so forth. Claiming tax exemption, just like these priests had. Okay, tax exemption, claiming claiming that they're doing charitable work, but they're really just spending it on themselves. And of course, without doubt, they're giving contributions to people, read bribes to government officials to continue this. Nothing new under the sun. And it's a picture of what's coming to America and to the world at large. Now we continue on in Genesis 47 in verse 23 through 27. Then Joseph said to the people, I have bought you this day in your land from Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. It shall come to pass in the increase, you shall give the fifth part unto Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be your own, the seed of the land for your food, and for your households, and for the food of your little ones. And they said, You've saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord. We will be Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph made a law over the land of Egypt unto this day, that Pharaoh should have a fifth part, except for the land of the priests only, which are not Pharaoh's. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. Okay, so he bought them this day. Notice now he's talking to the people. He bought them. How did he buy them? Government dependence. Okay. Now, is it Pharaoh's not? They're not involved directly as Pharaoh's slave. That'd be a lot of trouble for Pharaoh for one thing. Okay, slaves need slave masters, and Pharaoh can't be, slave master over every person individually, and so on and so forth. So I was going to enslave them with taxes. A fifth part's going to be Pharaoh's from now on. Eminent domain. Pharaoh owns the land. He can put you on. He can take you off of it. If he decides he wants to use the land for a different purpose, he can do that, like the land of Goshen. Perhaps there were people living there. Not anymore. Pharaoh told them, You're leaving. So that Israel and his people could live there. That land there by the brook of Egypt, where their livestock could continue. And so now they're not being taxed they're not being taxed as well, because of course they have to sell their lands and themselves to lands to Egypt. But everyone else has become part of the new slavery, as it were. The new slavery of not owning the means to be independent. The slavery of government dependence. The slavery of paying high taxes. For the dubious, the fund being being depend upon the government. So you continue to be dependent upon the government. I'm going to keep you taxed to keep you dependent on the government. So you're going to have to give the government, and the government's going to give back to you. You're going to own nothing and be happier. Is the message here? Just in the Great Reset, which again, the people out there who are doing this advertise on the internet, you can go look it up on YouTube yourself or whatever. Not conspiracy when they're advertising it. And that is their slogan. You'll own nothing and be happier. But of course, they didn't mean them. Pharaoh didn't mean him. And the religious leaders didn't mean them either. But for Israel is exempt from that. And because of that, people are going to get jealous. And we'll talk about that in a future lesson, because it's the blessing of God. Why does God want them blessed this way? So they can grow and multiply exceedingly. That's the entire purpose. Large families require large amounts of money. And God's purpose is to turn them into a large ethnic group inside of Egypt. And we'll see that come to pass in future lessons. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.